Thanks, guys, for that great shipper update this morning. And now we've got our first live guest in for FreightWaves Now, Andrew Lockwood from Suddath Global Logistics. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on FreightWaves Now this morning. I've got to say, I'm really excited to see you back because way back during Global Supply Chain Week, other Andrew, he was my first interview for FreightWaves. And so I feel like I've kind of come full circle now that I'm talking to you again. It's great to have you this morning.
Awesome. It's glad to be here. Happy Friday, everybody. Glad to join.
Happy Friday is right. And so, Andrew, you guys are down in Florida. You're calling this kind of the golden age of logistics. Tell me a little bit about why you're making that sentiment and what you see kind of going on in the industry right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, we see just a lot of chaos, a lot of activity going on in a way that we probably wouldn't have predicted 2 or 3 years ago. Some of the changes that have been in place have only accelerated with COVID. And so, as we were talking about, yeah, I think we're entering into a golden age of logistics where we're going to see different job opportunities pop up. We're going to see different skill sets and need. It's going to lead to really a kind of a new age of how we go about the logistics and supply chain. Andrew's shameless plug, by the way, your point of sale newsletter yesterday, I thought you hit it on the head with Petco, and that's a great example, Kaylee, of what you're talking about. Is here's a company that has a lot of retail outlets, but they've tried to figure out a way to combat the other e-commerce retailers there with how they distribute their product. So buy online, pick up in store. You've got the BOPIS model there. They've basically leveraged their stores as distribution points rather than a centralized DC method. So great example, by the way. I just wanted to plug that because I thought that led exactly to what you were talking about, Kaylee. This is the new age of logistics. It's chaotic, and you've got to be able to pivot and be really flexible.
Andrew, it's other Andrew here. I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of the jobs, because I think back to my high school days. I think it was my junior or senior year. My high school history teachers, they showed us a video that said, "We are preparing you for jobs that have not yet been created." Mm-hmm. And that's so true. Here I am standing at FreightWaves, a company that was not created back then, right? I'm working in a job that was not created. And here we have all of these changes in retail, changes like Petco, where they're trying to distribute their endpoints and decentralized distribution. Talk to me about the importance of logisticians moving forward, right? And this new kind of breed of logistician that will come, that's kind of half economist, half logistician, something close to our own Anthony Smith. Talk to me about the importance of those type of people.
And hey, I would even add psychology to the mix as well, because that's part of what we're seeing is for a good logistician in this environment, you have to really know your end consumer. Like, what is the end consumer thinking? How do they want the product delivered? Do they really care about lead time and all the things we think they care about? So, it's part, business knowledge, economics, supply and demand. A good example of that is all of the freight there on the Pacific Ocean. I mean, you're seeing container rates that are just super sky high, and that's going to cascade down into the prices that consumers are willing to pay. So, I think for a really good logistician, and for the listeners that are straight out of college, hey, get a side hustle. That side hustle informs your day hustle. But that business knowledge and economics is really going to play a big part into shaping how you approach supply chain thinking, not just the traditional logistician type skill set. And then the psychology piece, you layer that on, Andrew, and I think that's where, like we've talked about, and really knowing your end consumer and how things should be delivered and what that expectation is. Those three things, a combination, it's a great skill set that I think we're going to see a big need for here in the coming years.
So speaking from someone who is, 3 years out of college as of like 2 weeks ago, I 1000% agree with that sentiment of having that side hustle, whether that's not necessarily your end goal of your end industry, even if you're, like us here working in what would be kind of broadcast logistics, but also having that side hustle in retail or in customer service, that makes you get a broader understanding of why what you're doing in that side hustle matters and kind of how it relates across the board, right? So for folks that are coming into this industry, do you have any advice besides just get as much exposure as you possibly can? We talk about the hiring shortages and people not wanting to make it into these jobs because maybe they're scared of what the culture is like, or they're scared of what it's going to take for them to succeed here. But you really don't necessarily need this massive skill set. You just need a skill set that you can form to where you're going, right?
Yeah, I think there's two points that I try to emphasize with the folks that I'm close to on my team, or folks just getting into the industry that are brand new, and it's really this: is try to go for the cafeteria approach. Get a little bit of everything. Work in the warehouse. Know how trucks are loaded. Try to experience as much as you can along the way. and then look at it objectively. Take a step back and say, what is going to be rare in this industry? Right now, I mean, there's been a lot of focus on electronic and autonomous vehicles. We've known that, that for years, but now this past year or two, you're seeing these really complex, decentralized supply chain models pop up, and you've got to have people that figure out how much inventory do I actually need? I don't know. Let me run the numbers. And so you need a technical skill set, but you've got to have the business knowledge too. So cafeteria method, try to experience as much as you can, figure out what you really like and where your skills are, and then be able to plug in that way that really makes you a rare asset and commodity in the industry.
Hey, Andrew, now that we're talking about inventories and warehousing a little bit, you're right up my alley. I did want to touch on this a little bit because, as you decentralize distribution, as you disperse these endpoints, either it be to store or to home, you make a much more complex supply chain. And it takes a mindset shift towards data-driven insights and towards continuous planning and away from kind of the old demand forecasting that has been of the last few decades. Talk to me about the challenges there. That's a big mindset shift that that companies maybe not think about so much, and they don't know that it takes real investment. So talk to me about the investments and the mindset change that needs to go from old demand forecasting to this new agile continuous planning.
I'm so glad you brought it up. So very interesting. There was a New York Times article this week that talked about, and basically the premise is that the world is running out of everything. And I have to kind of assert, I don't think that's true. I just think the bottleneck has shifted, but it has everything to do with how we view inventory and its role in the supply chain. And so I'm a big subscriber to the lean methodology. Lean is great in a number of ways because companies, especially the publicly traded ones, are not going to want a whole bunch of capital sitting on their books in inventory that's just sitting there, not doing anything. You got to sell it off, and you've got mountains of inventory. So lean is all about trying to be agile and keep as little of inventory there and just in time, as possible. Now, the New York Times kind of points out through this that where we've been burned in the last couple of months, you look at auto manufacturers, you look at the need for PP&E and some of the medical supplies, and their assertion is that we're too lean. And we are, but demand, you have to believe demand pulls through the supply chain. So really from a lean perspective, the bottleneck's just shifted. Where's the bottleneck? Well, it's in the container ships on the Pacific Ocean. There's only so many containers. There's only so many trucks and railroad cars on the lines. And so that's really where we're seeing the bottleneck now is the supply chain is the bottleneck. It's not the inventory. We can pull through the inventory. So back to your original point there, Andrew, I think most companies, most shippers are going to have to reassess not only how much inventory they have, maybe it could be the same amount, but where do you put it? So let's bring up Petco again, because I thought that was a perfect example. Petco has said, hey, we're not going to ship everything e-commerce just from our central distribution centers. We're actually going to use our footprint in our stores to do that as well. Great idea. I love the concept. So where you ship from and how you position your inventory is very complex. There's no one size fits all. But Andrew, you hit it on the head. I mean, we have to all kind of rethink about where we're putting that inventory at the end of the day.
That's right, and it can be an expensive and complex thing. Mm-hmm. That's why it takes having strong logisticians and having people with this knowledge of the skill sets that we've been discussing throughout this. All right, Andrew, I've got to wrap us up. Thank you so much for joining us today on this busy Friday. I hope you have a great weekend.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me on. Happy Friday.